Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're very excited to talk about Hempcrete today. We have a great big audience, which is fantastic. We're going to be joined with the founders of Rocky Mountain Hemp Build, who are on the line with us today.
And so who we are, um, we're subcontractors providing hempcrete wall and insulation solutions. Our vision statement is to create sustainable buildings for generations of healthy living. And what we offer is foremost a healthy living environment, particularly for people who are sensitive to mold and toxins in the living environment. We provide high-performing bonded cellulose insulation and a carbon negative thermal mass solution, and we'll go into all of those.
All in Hempcrete.
So between the two of us, Eamonn is the building guy and I'm the numbers guy. And over the past 6 months, we've been setting up the business, developing our logo, setting up our website, and also carrying out some material research and developing relationships with suppliers. We're particularly keen to promote the US market and US suppliers, and we've identified several or a few herd suppliers here, which is great because up to now a lot of the material has been coming from Canada or France, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So our services include consultancy, surveying, coordinating with the architect and general contractor, all the way through to installation.
Okay, all right, so what is Hempcrete? It's three very simple ingredients, as you can see: hemp hurd, lime, and water, and that makes Hempcrete. Hemp hurd is the woody core of the plants, so also known as hemp shivs, that's a European term, and also hemp core fiber. So when we're getting this hemp hurd, we're looking for something under an inch, between 5 and 25 millimeters, as you can see, less than 5% of the fiber, and clean of all dust. For lime, there's a number of different limes, and we'll get into that a bunch later. You can see them underneath. And then water. So you mix these three together to make a nice, beautiful apple crumble that you cast into the wall, and that's what we call Hempcrete. We find that there's a little bit more of a formal term called bonded cellulose insulation. We find that that's a little bit more precise. There's also hemp lime, because lime is, half of the magic that happens with this wall. And also hemp concrete, which is kind of a misnomer because it is not load bearing and it also cannot be used underwater.
Great, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the first one of those, the hurd and hemp in general. So generally there are three categories of hemp, as you can see on this table. Hurd, which has traditionally been viewed as a byproduct of textile, of fiber production, in this table falls under fiber. It has a high planting density compared with flower or CBD, and it can grow up to 15 feet high. Again, very different to the flower or even the seeds. The price quoted there, so the yield of 1 to 5 tons per acre, that depends on the variety and the growing conditions. 1 to 5.5 tons you can get per acre. And the price quoted there is for the unprocessed bales of hemp. So the raw material that we buy actually goes for about 5 times that price. So as you can see, that's great for farmers who are looking to diversify. The other thing to mention about this is that there's a trend now to grow CBD plants closer together, more in the way of the fiber, which is great because that allows the farmer to get 2 or 3 different crops. And then finally, the decortication is the process that the fiber then goes through, and Eamonn's going to talk about that a little later. Here we can just see some pictures of what we were discussing before, the CBD plant on the left, the industrial hemp on the right. As you can see there in the middle, the fiber, once it's been cut, remains in the field to undergo a process called retting. Eamonn's going to explain that in a moment. It's then baled up into the bales that you can see there on the right.
Okay, I love this picture on the left. So that is the hemp stalk. As you can see, the fiber is separated from that woody core. That's the piece that we're looking for. After it's separated, then it's processed and milled, and you can see that in the middle, the hemp hurd, and on the right is the fiber, and that is used in textiles, ropes, and has been used for thousands and thousands of years. All right, here's some more examples of some herds. As you see on the top right, that one, it has a little bit extra, I'm sorry, yeah, the top left. That has a little bit more material in it. It was a little less desirable than we want, and we also found that that material on the top left had an extremely high mold count, which could cause some complications in the future when building with it. The lower left is one we've been using, which we're fairly happy with. That came from Quebec, Canada. But the one we're highlighting here is the one in the center, and that is coming out of the San Luis Valley. Very clean, beautiful herd, and we're very excited to be using this in the near future, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. On the top right, just to see it as a whole, as a cross section of the stalk, that's what's going on right there. And in the bottom right, that's 500 times magnetized to show you actually the porous nature of the herds, and that is just absolutely fantastic for insulation. Okay, hemp herd processing, as he was saying earlier, the retting process. So in the top left, you can see before retting and after retting. And what that is they just lay it out in the fields to dry on its own. And so as you can see, after about 2 to 4 weeks of retting, it will start separating, which makes it a lot easier to decorticate. In terms of decortication, looking on the bottom left, that's in the 1800s, which was a very simple wood contraption to hammer those stalks to separate the herds from the fibers. We're also hearing about wet hemp processing, which we're intrigued on, and we look forward to playing around with this a little bit more, where the retting does not need to happen. So stay tuned for that. Bottom right, the FiberTrack 660. This is a company called Formation Ag that has a decorticator that actually uses rollers instead of hammering it to separate the herds from the fibers. And you can see in that picture in the top right, they're taking the processed herds, putting it on that conveyor belt, which rolls up to a cleaning machine to take all the dust out and to remove the rest of the fibers.
We now move on to lime, and lime has been used in construction for millennia. The Egyptians used it for the pyramids, the Romans perfected it. The use of lime, however, declined after the advent or the invention of Portland cement. Portland cement was thought to be stronger, and eventually it became cheaper. However, there has been a resurgence of lime in building projects as people rediscover its potential. Here are some reasons that make lime attractive to use. So it's often used when renovating old buildings. If you haven't checked out our new president, Frank's website and their company, Living Craft, highly suggest you go there and have a look at what wonderful,
Mr. President,
what wonderful walls can be created with lime. The key point here is when using it with hempcrete, it allows water vapor through. So it allows that natural characteristic of the hempcrete to be carried through to the outer wall. Also, it has a much lower environmental impact than conventional concrete. So lime has a pH of 8.3, so it's naturally antifungal. The kind of Puritan approach in hempcrete is to use natural hydraulic lime. So depending on how hydraulic it is, a lime is measured on a scale. So 5.0 NHL would be more hydraulic. And you can see there a picture on the left, bottom left, an example of a 3.5 NHL lime. There's a debate going on in the industry as to whether to add cement to the binder. The advantage being that it sets faster, but the compromise being that it's less breathable and less flexible, and therefore compromises the insulative qualities. The fourth picture here, you can see a lime binder from France, which actually has a natural cement content of up to 75%. And the furthest picture on the right is a newly developed lime binder by Ryan Shivers from Limestrong, and we're very excited to go with that company, which is based in Utah. We just briefly want to mention the lime cycle here in this context because it highlights the emissions and absorption of CO2 as it goes through the process. It starts off as calcium carbonate, or commonly known as limestone, which was geologically formed over millions of years underwater from rock and the skeletons of sea animals like shells and skeletons of fish and other sea creatures. Those deposits are now being mined either underground or in a quarry, and you can see a picture of a quarry there on the right. After being mined, it's processed by heating it to 900 degrees Celsius. The resulting white powder is highly flammable and lets off a very bright light. And so in the 1800s, an inventor created a system to put it into theaters, and hence the term standing in the limelight. The quicklime is then converted to hydrated lime, which is the way we buy it in the store. And when the quicklime sets, it starts absorbing back some of the CO2 that was emitted in the earlier stage.
All right, hempcrete characteristics. As you see, we're going to turn on a video here of me trying to burn hempcrete. So as you can see on the left there, that's just hemp in the bucket mixer. And that's before we cast it into the walls. On the right, that is actually a wall we did a while back, and it just turned out beautifully. Nice, beautiful lines. So fire resistant, yes it is. We'll get into that a little bit more on the next slide. The pest resistant, insects, bugs, and rodents are repelled by the lime, which makes it itchy and uncomfortable, as it does for humans, and that's why we wear protective gear. Mold resistant, as he said before, the high pH, mold cannot survive in a high pH environment of 8.3. The acoustics, 90% of sound is absorbed by raw hempcrete, well, due to its porous nature. And we will talk about this in the next slide a little bit more. Good structural qualities. While hempcrete is not load bearing, it strengthens wood framing by 3 to 4 times. The compressive loading of a standard stud, due to the support of the hempcrete, provides to the wood stud in weak access binding. The next three, temperature, moisture, and carbon, we will get into that a little bit more. And biodegradable and recyclable. So we haven't seen it recycled because it lasts so long. They say a minimum of almost 300 years. But we have this wonderful idea of taking a recycled home once you are to take it down, to maybe use it in subfloors or even in attics. And it is biodegradable. If you don't recycle it, you can just throw it in the earth and feel good about it. Just to check it out, as you see, it is completely fire resistant. And due to the recent times, especially around here in Colorado, this is a subject that people are really thinking about. So as Mae West would say, too much of a good thing is wonderful. All right, facts and figures. So we got these from Tradical Hempcrete. This is a European company that has done studies over the last 20 years. Once again, that mean acoustic absorption coefficient of 0.69. This study is just absolutely fantastic, and they found in the UK that it actually far exceeded the 53 decibel rating of 57 and 58 decibels. The second one is the fire rating, and that was done by Hempitexture last year under the ASTM standards, and it received a perfect score of 0 of 450, which is absolutely fantastic. And that last one circled there is the carbon capture of 110 kilograms of carbon dioxide in a meter cubed. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. All right, temperature regulating properties. This one is just so fun to look into. So the R value of 1.3 to 2.4 per inch, and that's at 1 inch. What they're finding is as the wall is thicker, this grows exponentially. Therefore, a 12-inch wall can actually have an R value of 40 plus. The other beautiful thing about this is it not only does it have great insulative properties, but it has thermal mass. And this performance together creates a beautiful thing called thermal inertia. The first feedback for newly built hempcrete homes is showing that bioclimatic houses can be built with drastically reduced heating costs and no air conditioning. And on average of an estimated annual cost of heating of 1,000 square feet is only $167 per year. So I'd take that. All right, moisture regulating properties. This is probably one of the most enticing attributes of hempcretes. Relative humidities. As the relative humidity rises in the room or outside, it will stabilize the inside, so between 40 and 60%. So once it starts going over 60%, most people are saying around 63%, the walls will start taking on that moisture to keep the room at a stable 40 to 60%. These walls can do this all the way up to 93% at a sustained level over a period of time. One fact that we're just trying to wrap our heads around, it's amazing. 1 cubic meter can hold 1,314 pounds of water vapor without creating mold because it releases it over time.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about carbon in construction. And so the problem is that in the past decades, a lot of emphasis has been placed on the performance of buildings, with less emphasis being placed on the materials used to build the core and shell. And as you can see in the diagrams, they do make up a considerable part. To its credit, the construction industry has started to recognize this problem. So for example, the World Green Building Council has set a target for all buildings to be net zero by 2050. Why is all this important? Well, we're expecting a massive growth in the global building stock, the equivalent of adding a New York City every month for the next 40 years. So an example of embodied energy versus operational energy. So a lot of you will be familiar with structural insulated panels, which market themselves as, providing 60 to 80% less energy usage, proven long-term reduced energy bills, 45% lower CO2 emissions per year, saves you money and saves the planet, is what they claim. But what they're less keen to tell you is that they are made from polyurethane foam, which is made from a hydrofluorocarbon blowing agent that has an upward of 1,000 times the global warming potential of carbon dioxide. So a study actually found that the time it takes for the operational carbon savings to pay back the emissions from the fabrication and installation is about 40 to 60 years. So the benefits of using a material that has a negative or a negative embodied carbon are obvious. So embodied carbon is essentially all the carbon that's included in the actual building from the start of the building process all the way through to its lifetime. And here on the right, you can see a table showing the embodied carbon of various building materials. So for example, to produce 1 kilogram of denim batt 1.28 kilograms of carbon were emitted, whereas with Hempcrete, actually 2.73 kilograms of carbon were absorbed for every kilogram of Hempcrete. And the thing to note about embodied carbon is that once it's in place, once it's installed, the carbon emissions are locked in place. So here we're going through a simple example of using the number that was quoted by Tradical of 110 kilograms of CO2 absorbed by 1 cubic meter of hempcrete. So that works out to 6.9 pounds of CO2 per cubic foot of hempcrete. If we take a 2,000-foot house with 9 feet high walls, we get to a cubic foot of 1,458 of hempcrete required if you take out the windows and doors. So the total sequestered would be roughly 10,000 pounds. And that includes the calculations surrounding the lime. Obviously, if you are using internal walls made of hempcrete, then this value is going to be even higher. So on a national level, that translates to 7 million tons of CO2 that could be sequestered for the building stock that's being currently built in this year. If the same homes are built with fiberglass, there are emissions of 1.4 million compared to the 7 million sequestered by hempcrete.
Okay, the history of this stuff. So it's been used for thousands of years. The Romans used it in their concrete to strengthen up their concretes. In France, 600 AD, it was actually Gaul at that point. They built a bridge, as you can see on the left there, and that bridge is the oldest standing structure in that town. They used hemp in their mortar to build this bridge. Now, one wonderful kind of story behind this bridge is the Germans in World War II were going to blow up the bridge, but they realized that that bridge was their only way out. So they didn't blow it up. They had to retreat. Thank God they left the bridge up for their sake and crossed the bridge. And the last tank turned around and started shelling the bridge. Unfortunately for them, that they could not blow the bridge up. So apparently this bridge here is bomb-proof. And if you ever go there, you can actually see a mortar shell still stuck in it. That picture in the middle is the beautiful Ellora caves in India. And so they used hemp in their mix as well. And it has stand the test of time, over 1,500 years old. There are some adjacent caves across the way with 30 Buddhist monk temples as well, but they did not use hemp in their mixes, and it is degrading. It has molds, and it has lost about 25% of their artwork due to this. And on the right, this is a hemp house in Japan. All that roof there, that beautiful roof, is made of hemp stalks, and it has stood the test of time and is still in great condition. All right, modern hempcretes. So a lot of times when we talk about hempcrete, it's like, oh, it's a weed house, right? Or it's a hippy dippy kind of dome or anything like this. Well, as you can see here, you can build quite conventionally, and it's just gorgeous. You can use it in many different applications. As you can see in the top right, you can curve some walls. In the middle picture in the top, you can actually leave it nude and pigment it. And we played around with a little bit of that, and we absolutely love it. It's beautiful. The bottom right as well, they left it showing, and it's just a gorgeous feature with nice texture. All right, and although we are behind, we are coming on strong. So these are just a few of the homes. There's at least 60 homes built in the U.S. The one on the top right, that was done by Hemptexture in Bellingham, Washington. And once again, another curved wall with a conventional look as well. The Gnaw House is another beautiful home built 10 years ago. And something else I like about this house is that they actually use the clay on the land to build their floor. And in the top right, the mayor of Asheville, North Carolina, built this beautiful modern home. So yes, it can be conventional in all types of ways. This one I love. This was done by Anthony Nairn of Du Chambre in Quebec, Canada. So as you can see in the top left, it is an older home, but then if you look inside, it's absolutely gorgeous. Now, what I love about Anthony is he's got a simplistic approach to this, and he just really believes in this this material, how it can kind of save the building world in the long term. So what he spoke of, I mean, he's a great inspiration of mine. And what he spoke of is if you build a house now out of conventional cheap materials, you're going to have to be fixing up this house in about 30 years. That's not the case with these houses. They stand the test of time. And like we said earlier, it's around 300 plus years.
So here's an example of a 42-unit housing development in the UK. The wall structures were all built out of hempcrete, and if it's possible, we're going to watch this video now featuring Kevin MacLeod, sorry, who some of you may know from the TV show Grand Designs. Well, we hope you enjoyed that short video. We'll now look at some other commercial hempcrete projects. So this is a brewery in the UK built in 2006. The main goal here was to smooth out the daytime temperature peaks and to create a consistent temperature. And they managed to do that using hempcrete. By their calculation, they also absorbed 150 tons of CO2 as opposed to 600 tons that would be otherwise emitted. As you'll see there also, it's covered by a green roof, which helps with the insulation.
And that's a shout out to Andy Crete of Green Roofs of Colorado. If you ever need a green roof, go to him.
The next one is the Marks and Spencer retail store. This is one of the it is the largest retail store in Europe. Again, here they used hemp-clad panels. So it's got hempcrete in it as well as a layer of hemp wool. And in this project, they projected 80 tons of CO2 locked in with a total of 340 tons projected cumulative savings. And finally, for our case studies, the Science Museum Group, which comprises of the Science Museum in London and several regional science museums. 90% of their artifacts are at any given time are in storage. So storage is a big thing for them. They bought aircraft hangars from the 1930s, which didn't have any heating or insulation, as you can see there in the middle. They had a need for a room for its especially sensitive artifacts, where they wanted to maintain a steady relative humidity. So they used hempcrete panels here with great success. And you can see they won several awards for this design.
All right, so what are we offering? So we are a subcontractor offering cast in situ hempcrete for new builds and as retrofit. We provide consultancy and guidance for clients, general contractors, and subcontractors. We have a fully trained crew that consists of a foreman, mixer, runner, and tampers. And we can do about 1,000 square feet in a 5-day week. The install cost is $20 to $25, and that's all dependent on sometimes like location, other nuances in the building industry, and like the curved walls. And we do offer a 20-year warranty.
This slide here is just a quick price comparison of a wall segment 16 by 8, built in the traditional way and then with hempcrete. So on the left, we have the traditional frame, and then the exterior wrap, the plywood sheathing, the insulation, and the drywall, and some labor assumptions in there. So roughly 1,500 for that project. If we look at Hempcrete, we still have framing, but we can use less studs because we can place the studs at 24 on center rather than 16, so slight cost savings there. And then all of the exterior components, or all of the components on the left there fall away when using the Hempcrete wall solution, which is all in one. We're using 6-inch thickness here to compare like with like in terms of the R value. And we're using our average price here, so not our lowest price. And at the average price, we can see we come in pretty cost competitive, or just above traditional.
All right, so a little shout out to, once again, our Mr. President of Living Crafts. The #1 material used to finish Hempcrete is lime plaster. MgO board, other known as magnesium oxide board, is something else we're really interested in using. Completely biodegradable as well. You can break it up and throw it in your yard. Hemp wood is on the newer ends of things, but we are extremely excited to play around with this a little bit. Milk paint is actually something that we will be using in upcoming projects, and as you can see in the middle, it is beautiful. And as my dad, I was mentioning this to my father, he's like, oh, we used to use this stuff all the time in the past, and it's been around for 100 years, and it's just very simple. It's lime with some pigment and some casein from the milk, and that helps to bind. In the exterior, we have a lime render, 3/4 inches on the outside, wood paneling, brick, and stucco. Now, if you wanted to use something that is not breathable, that is totally fine. You can finish your house any way you like. If it is not breathable, we just put an 1.5-inch air gap between the Hempcrete wall and that siding, and to allow the wall to breathe. Challenges. Challenges I find come in all shapes and forms, but challenges are just opportunities to grow. Standards. So there are some standards, as you saw earlier. There's plenty of standards over in Europe, and this is coming on board more and more. So we will have these very soon as this grows. Testing capabilities under development. That's happening as well. So we are getting our, like we said earlier, we are getting our herds tested, and just to have a little bit more standards with materials, growing, the types of hemp, where the lime's coming from, and all that. Processors, decorticators, that has been a huge bottleneck in the growth of getting clean herd. And so, but that is also coming on strong. So as you'll see in the near future, there will be a lot of processing plants coming up. I've heard of one that's going to be quite huge in, I think it's Greeley or just outside of Greeley. So that's exciting as well. Recognition, this is just education. So all these challenges we're finding is just simple, and that's why we're doing this presentation today, is to educate them. The regulators, you know, it's great to be in Boulder County here because there's so many people that are kind of conscious of the green building environment. And if you're not in a more conscious town, there's simple ways of speaking to these regulators to move Hempcrete forward.
There are also, of course, opportunities in the market. So there are new technologies being developed, and we'll come on to that in a moment. Also, a positive development has been the development of trade associations. So the Colorado Green Building Guild is one of those. Thank you for hosting us and helping us promote Hempcrete. Consumer sentiment, you know, the consumer is becoming more discerning in terms of healthy living environment. So that falls right into that. Also more conscious about the carbon implications of building. The new administration in Washington obviously is more in favor of the kind of materials that we're using, and government schemes like the target to 2030 carbon neutral for buildings, they also raise the profile of alternative building materials. So with building codes, we found actually the hurdles for getting a permit to build with hempcrete aren't that high. Successful applications have used the term bonded cellulose insulation. So until hempcrete becomes structural, it is only just an insulation material. So any concerns that code officials will have are going to be around fire resistance and thermal performance. And I think as we've demonstrated, there is enough evidence to suggest that those criteria are fulfilled. And a final point, just having a structural engineer who is acquainted with, or even better, has worked with hempcrete is a huge advantage when filing for your application.
All right, other companies doing things, as we are not the only ones. There are plenty of great companies out there doing great things. We love the Erisi spray applicator. Excited to use this in the near future. Just Biofiber, JVF, structural blocks, that's coming on here real soon. There's also Hemp Block out of Australia, coming to a state near you, and S2A modular panels, which is an exciting venture as well. Okay, so Rocky Mountain Hemp Build, what we have done and what we are doing. So that picture on the top left, that's a 40-foot curved wall. This was done for Ananda Apothecary back in September. And they wanted a really stable environment for their lab that they were moving into this 1,000 square foot circular garage. So they chose to use hempcrete, and we did this along with hemp wool. As you can see in the ceiling, it's a little tough to see, but you can see it there. And turned out fantastic to create a nice stable environment for their essential oils. We are also very excited about the showroom in Boulder, and more on that. That's coming up in the spring 2021. We did build the subfloor for it, and we actually used hempcrete because it is outside. Something that I love about this building is that it's a smaller building, and it's like an ADU, even though it's a studio, a little studio and showroom. And this is something that we can do for you, is build these smaller hempcrete homes or little studios in your backyard that kind of are pretty self-sufficient. The next one, which is coming up real soon, about a month and a half here in April, is the Saguache Hotel. And this is a 130-year-old hotel that's been dormant for about 30 years. And this wonderful man named Andy Hackberth has bought it, purchased it, and is now renovating it. And he is going to town, and he wants to use all sustainable materials building this thing. So that's a very exciting project. Another thing on that is that the herds that we are using for this project, it comes from 30 miles away. So that's a big one in the sustainability world. The next one is a residential unit in Crestone. More on that in the future. We're excited about that one as well. The basement retrofit in Boulder is for employees of First Crop. And to go full circle with this, First Crop is also working with the hemp farmer that is getting our herd supply. So in full circle, they get their CBDs, and the walls that are going to be in their remodel are from those plants. So talk about using the whole plants. And then the last one there is something that is just going to be extremely exciting. It's a 10,000 square foot multi-unit housing in central Boulder, and this is done by Goose Creek Community Land Trust. And so this is going to be, I think, 13 units. And so this is done, the lead on that is David Adamson. If you don't know him, he's just a wonderful human. He lives in a straw bale home. He has been a sustainable building advocate for decades, and is just a plethora of information, and has been great support for us as well. And so that more to come on that as well. And so thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed our presentation. As you can see, you can contact us at any time, and look forward to working with you guys and collaborating in the future.
Thank you so much for joining us. That was fantastic. I'm interested in more information about where it's coming from. like, I mean, it's great that it's coming from Colorado now. Like, as you said, like a lot of people had been getting it from Canada and different places in Europe before, and especially when you're talking about carbon, it's just better to get it closer. What's the state of because you're sourcing the raw material and mixing it yourself. What's the state of that in terms of both Hempcrete, which obviously the focus of this, but also the hemp bats? I just feel like we should just see this blowing up all over the place. Like, is it difficult to get the raw material still? Are there barriers to that end of the equation?
There have been, but you know what? It's been getting easier and easier month to month. So when I first started a little over a year ago, I was getting material, but it was a little bit back ordered sometimes, and it seems to be coming a little bit easier and a little bit more sources. And I just got a call actually yesterday from somebody in New York who is really interested in us using their fiber, so they're sending us out samples. The wet retting company is sending us samples too. So there's a lot of people coming on board. There's a huge plant in North Carolina as well that is decorticating. But what I've been hearing is we kind of need these processing plants, you know, state almost, or every 4 states, so we can have it closer.
The problem is also there is a capital investment cost to get a decorticator. They don't come cheap. That said, prices have come down, but there is a capital investment required.
Got it. So it's not like the growing it, there's no really barriers to that. The using it, there's no really barriers to that. The in between is the processing that is really, getting more people online doing that.
And so we also talked with Formation Ag, and so if they were just doing herds, it wouldn't be cost competitive. So to find buyers for the herds and the fibers, that's when they start making money. So to have the buyers for both of those is extremely important for the processing plants in order to make money.
So just some questions coming in on that note. If someone were to just be looking for the herd, who do you talk to about buying hemp herd, or would you sell that as well?
Absolutely, give us a call.
Then next question, would love to hear a little bit more again about the net carbon of growing and using the material. So maybe, I guess, if we could go back to the breakdown slide of the hemp versus lime and how much each part takes in the equation.
So go ahead.
Yeah, so actually it's not as straightforward as it might seem. There's a lot of information out there on the internet, a lot of claims that aren't referenced. So what we've tried to do is really only go with information out there that is properly referenced. And so Tradical have collated a lot of this information. So in this 110 kilogram figure, that actually takes into account the lime production. So it takes into account the emissions that were emitted in the lime production, but then that also accrue back into the lime over the course of the life of the hempcrete.
What I like about the lime too is that although there are emissions related to creating the lime, in its when it's petrifying back into the rock, it takes on about 50% of the emissions that it put out. So
over the course of the next few years, this is a year-long kind of process. It doesn't happen immediately.
Yeah, and that makes me think. I mean, one thing I think probably, were you saying it was the other name for it is the what is it, calcified cellulose, or what is it?
Cellulose insulation.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it sounds like kind of one of the misnomers maybe about it is that hempcrete is not sort of replacing concrete, right? In most instances, or ever probably, it's replacing cellulose more often, or insulation of different types.
So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, speak a little bit more to that, because I know it's like kind of that's something that we were discussing ahead of time in leading up to this. Jesse was talking about getting a bunch of questions about the structural stability of hempcrete, and we're kind of like, oh no, I don't think you use it for that.
So concrete, yeah, has its place in this world. Absolutely. We're not going to build a foundation out of hempcrete. We're not going to build underwater pillars out of hempcrete. But we could definitely compete with and hopefully replace pretty quickly ICFs. Sorry about the people out there that love the ICFs, insulated concrete forms. But to minimize the amount of concrete going into a form just to chase an R value and not think about today. I think with the operational carbon emissions, that's what people have been thinking about too much, chasing that R value and not thinking about what they're actually using to do that. So this is what we're trying to replace, or at least educate people to think about when they're building their home.
I want to get back to that a little bit. Question came in. What's the name of the decorticating plant in North Carolina that you mentioned at some point?
Oh, I don't know exactly the name of it. I will get back to you on that. I was talking to somebody the other day about it, and they were talking about it. We'll find out real quick for you.
Okay.
I'll get back to you.
No problem. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm definitely interested in more of some of the ways that people can choose to use it, because I saw in some of the photos, like sometimes it's you're putting it between studs. Sometimes, like you said, if you're replacing insulated concrete forms, you're probably needing a stud wall and then putting this outboard of that. Is that right? Like, I'm sort of interested in what sort of assemblies we would see this used in.
Yeah. So pretty simply, if you're doing stick framing, 2x4, 16 on center, that's great. You can do post and beam. You can use steel. Something we didn't mention, if you are using a metal in the wall that needs to be galvanized or powder coated because the lime will react to the metal. But you can basically build your frame out and your structure. And what we do is we come in and we just bury it. We bury that frame. So you have to have your electrical and plumbing in, which you would anyway. And we go in and just bury it with the form. So we fill the forms out. Some traditional ways in terms of the last 20, 30 years has been to do 2 sets of framing, and that's a lot more wood, and it makes it easier to screw the forms into the wall where you would just fill in, but it's completely unnecessary as I've been trained to do so. You just have to, we just put in some spacers and bury that frame.
And for like further questions, looking at other questions coming in, if architects out there are interested in integrating these details into plans, where would you recommend? Who has, sort of details that might be good to look to, or are there certain books or resources that have details that work best for this?
We have all that information. We have some cross sections that shows the little changes that need to address a hempcrete wall, but quite honestly, it's not changing the whole system around. They're very simply just like a electrical box. You have to move it out just a little bit farther to complement the slightly thicker wall. But we have all that information for anybody that wants it.
And then to that point about utilities, we have a question. What happens if you need to access power, plumbing, post-construction service, cavity, things like that, utilities? Like how is that integrated?
If you needed to access, we really enjoy when you guys have it dialed in, but pretty simply, you can run conduit where you might potentially want it. And if that didn't happen, let's say you bought the house and you actually have to have that, you can easily just cut into it and then patch it up. Very simply. It's, you got to do the same with drywall. So it's about the same. You can just kind of dig in and run the conduit wherever you like.
What do you use for cutting it when you do that?
You can use any kind of saw. I mean, it's actually very, very easy to cut through. I used the circular saw just the other day to cut some pieces very simply. Yeah.
So it kind of behaves like wood in a way.
Yeah, because it is wood with a little bit
right,
of rock.
Yeah. Could you go in a little bit about the actual installation process? What are the stages, and what do people need to think about differently if they're integrating this into the project?
So yeah, on the front end, we would talk to the architects, and that's very important just to know the thickness of the wall. But pretty simply, I mean, it's about the same. So they get all their electrical plumbing, they'd have it all framed out, and then we would come in with our equipment, which is very simple. I mean, it's so primitive, as McLeod spoke of. There's no real wires. There's not much going on. We got a mixer. We got some buckets, and we have some tampers, a couple drills to get the forms in and out. And so it's a very simple and smooth process. Once we're done, you do have to let the wall dry out. So this is, I don't want to say a turnoff, but it's about the same in terms of the drying time. If you think about it, you call us, we're going to do the wall system. If you were going in a conventional route, you would have the siding guy, vapor wrap and insulation guy, then you would have your drywall guy, and then you would have your painter. With us, you would have the Hempcrete guy, and you get Mr. President Frank Wettenkamp to come and plaster it up. That's two. In terms of management, that's a lot easier to manage, and so timeline they find comes out to be about the same. Also, as you know, delays happen. So when you're only managing two contractors, subcontractors, there'll be less delays.
Right, because in your wall, when you're comparing the basic wall versus hempcrete wall, you're talking about a sheathingless assembly, right? Like you have a lot of sort of layers that you've taken out the
Yes,
process. Yeah.
exactly.
So basically, you would be able to just sort of do a vented rain screen with siding outboard of that on the exterior. Is that?
No, you don't even need to do that. Just the line plaster would be good enough.
Okay.
If you did want, like I was saying earlier, you can run some furring strips and create the air gap between the wall, and so
Yeah.
the wall would breathe outside the under, and you would just have this little air gap about 1.5 inches to allow the wall to breathe. But anything breathable can go on top.
Wow. Have you experienced a building inspector rejecting hemp construction for any reason?
No, we have not. And there has been in the past, we're talking 3, 4, 5 years ago, they had to just educate, as we are today, the people that the powers that be. And so the way they did that is just, we called it a bonded cellulose insulation, and they know what a cellulose insulation is. So once they were educated, they were excited about it. So no real hurdles other than a little bit of education.
I mean, that's great. I feel like the first time I heard about hemp insulation, all I heard about was like, oh, you kind of can't do it in the United States because there's a barrier at every level, at the growing level, at the processing level, at the transportation and code level, and it sounds like a lot of those are broken down now, which is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. With passing of the Farm Bill Act as well, that kind of opened up the gates. It's changed a lot in the last 5 years for sure.
In
We're
what
really
way?
not to hear that it's a weed house anymore. You
Yeah.
can't keep your house, okay?
Yeah, I feel like we're probably past that in part just because of like CBD and people understanding like, oh wait, that's different. So like there's these other uses that don't have anything to do with that.
You can't smoke it and you can't burn it.
What's that?
You can't smoke it and you can't burn it either.
Yeah, exactly. You can't burn it. You definitely can't smoke it. Question, going back to the wall system pricing slide. What does the all-in wall include? Does this include the finished plaster? We kind of touched on that a little bit, but
No,
That would.
no,
Okay.
no. We leave that up to Frank.
Frank, your name's coming out a lot. I think you're gonna have to come out here and talk about it in a minute. Let's see. although the material doesn't respond to load, how does it perform in shear? That's a
Actually,
question.
quite fantastic. They have found. So yeah, it's no problem.
So that's kind of what you were talking about with needing, you can have wider spaced out studs
Hmm.
because you can have that shear racking strength. You don't need the sheathing for shear, but you can't have the load on it.
Yeah, I mean, if you feel this stuff or go up against a hempcrete wall, I wouldn't suggest taking it on. It is like a concrete wall.
Hmm.
It's strong, and you'll break your hand on it. You cannot go through this stuff. Um, it's just the load bearing, and it's not too far off. Some people even play around with using a little less hemp and a little bit more cement in it, as we talked about earlier. So if the environment is less of a concern and structurally, you can add cement to it to make it a little bit more structural.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Um, yeah, I have my second hempcrete sample I plan to play with. I'm gonna do like a block this time and like try the, drilling into it and stuff like that. Like I couldn't really do that with that. I feel like I picked the wrong form when I did the tablet shape. Like I was like, oh, what am I gonna do with this now?
So
Um,
another thing with the screwing in, we did a test and we got up to about 80 pounds. So from a screw directly into hempcrete with no finish, we hung 80 pounds of it. That was kind of the breaking point, but this was also loosely packed hempcrete. So the tighter you pack it, the little bit more lime that you might use would strengthen it up, and that's just in the tamping. So if you wanted to hang some artwork, I would be extremely comfortable with at least a 50-pound something hanging consistently on the wall
hmm,
without finding a stud.
hmm. We got more questions coming in. I know probably some of you got to go because we're at 5:15 here, but this is being recorded and we are going to put it up on cgbg.org so you can watch it more later. But a couple more questions coming in. Can hempcrete be troweled on interior concrete block basement walls as insulation?
Can hempcrete be trowels? Is that what I
Yeah.
heard? Hempcrete can be applied to a basement wall insulation. Actually, the one that I mentioned with First Crop, they are redoing their basement. They're actually digging 2.5 feet down to create more space because it's a large crawl space right now, but they're actually going to put a separate unit there with a door and everything. So they're digging down, and we are going to do 6 inches of hempcretes right directly to the wall. We will have to porcupine that wall, and that means stick some screws in, some bolts to actually hold the hempcrete to the wall. Because if it has nothing to grab onto, then it could just you basically take it off. So
Yeah.
the process is called porcupining, but absolutely, because you already have the thermal mass, and the hempcrete will perform fantastic in a basement. Yeah,
So
and
how many how much do you have to affix in that porcupining process? Is it like, are we talking like hundreds of screws? Are you talking like every no?
I'd say one every couple feet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Somewhere around
that makes
there.
sense.
Just spread out sporadically.
Yeah, it
Just something to grab up.
depends how rough the wall is as well. If the wall already has some texture, then it can grab onto that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are the qualities with respect to air infiltration blower door tests? I know that was listed on the specs earlier, and I'm particularly interested in it since 475 were the air barrier people.
Yeah.
What I imagine that has to do with the thickness a lot, because you get greater air control with more thickness. But
Well, I'm really excited to use this in a passive solar house due to its monolithic structure. When you build cast in situ, you have a monolithic structure, and it is absolutely airtight, yet it breathes. So you don't have to have all that ventilation systems nearly as much. Yeah, so it is airtight. the biggest problem is usually around the windows.
Have you? Oh yeah. Have you used? Have you done a project where you do a blower door test before, or
Not yet.
not
No.
yet? Yeah.
That's
Um,
coming this summer.
well,
The house in Crestone that we're speaking of is going to be a passive solar design house. So we're excited about that.
I would love to hear about that when that blower door test happens.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, can you share the pros and cons of building hemp wall horizontally before installing? Okay, sorry. Hemp walls horizontally before installing versus installing vertically around the framing structure. Okay, you following that? I had to read it a couple times. Um, pros and cons of building hemp walls horizontally before
So,
installing versus vertically around the framing structure.
so essentially that's prefab. So you're creating it in a space and then bringing it to the construction site. So yeah, I mean, there are issues around transportation. Obviously, you need a big hall where you can create these things and then dry them out. And then also the feature that gets lost in building that way is it's no longer a monolithic wall structure. So you're going to have thermal bridges, and but the advantages are that you'd be able to do it in a controlled environment. You could do it regardless of the weather. Presumably, you could speed up the drying time as well. So there are advantages on both sides. And there are companies now looking at modular design structure with hempcrete in the walls.
Great. Okay, there's another question. Is there anything we can do yet to push for incentives, carbon credits, rebates to make prices actually lower than traditional? Is there anything like that on the horizon that you've heard of?
That's fantastic. We watched the embodied carbon brown bag with Will Schruber, and that was a big discussion in the discussion like this about a potential carbon tax or carbon credits. I would love to see that because it would be a pretty huge credit. I also think it needs to be pushed in the world of fire insurance to lower your insurance greatly. So we're excited to help people, help the industry understand this, so we can get that carbon tax or carbon credits towards our material. I hope that happens very soon. That just takes a lot of loopholes and red tape and all those good things.
I know I'll be looking very closely at what the Biden administration Build Back Better, anything that they happen to be putting out. Hopefully, we'll get some incentives to help us all out. Definitely. A couple more. Everyone's very excited. Still asking questions. That's great. How are R values determined per project if based on material thickness and density? So basically, like you said, you have that sort of, you get more R value as you get thicker. How do you measure that, or has that sort of been measured in labs already?
Well, yeah, we can definitely send some studies to whoever wants that information. Once again, it's all on who was packing it, how much lime was in it, what's the lime that's in it, what kind of herds. Like I said earlier, I like the really larger pieces of herd. We're excited to use that. But there's so many variables to just nail it down to one R value is very difficult. Who's packing it is probably the biggest thing.
And you know what we could do in terms of those studies and things that you had mentioned following up on is that we'll put this on our blog, and any resources you have, we could just link them there, and that way people can get the video for this and all of the additional resources right down below. So regarding lime, do lime binders have a shelf life? Is lime also considered biodegradable?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, it generally is biodegradable. The only thing to consider that it has a relatively high pH. So there might be a way of, if this is done on a big scale, of kind of neutralizing that, getting that more to 7. But yes, it is essentially biodegradable.
It's a rock.
Yeah. What was this?
So I can put my little experiment in the compost. That's all right.
Yes. Yeah, that's totally. Yeah. So
Because I broke it.
the little experiment that I did the first time I did, I guess in the video, if you saw the video, was the shot glass in the red Solo cup, and it was like a flower pot. But you know what? After doing that for a little bit, I was like, well, not many plants like a pH of 8.3, so it's got to be plants.
That's a good point.
Cactus in there, and we'll see if that cactus is gonna stay alive.
That's a good point. Yeah. So you know, for those of you out there with those sample kits, send us post whatever you make on social media. We got to come up with something other than a flower pot, right?
Yeah.
So regarding relative humidity mobility, does not the relative humidity of the outside environment affect the permeability of humidity in the hempcrete wall? In other words, does humidity movement from inside to the outside of the structure make a difference?
So relative humidity from the inside to the outside.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, what doesn't matter, I guess basically the environment that it's in. We're kind of in high desert here, right? So, but like, would this make a difference in how you're building in, let's say, the Pacific Northwest or something?
What we're finding is it's almost like a smart system. It's kind of like a little smarter than us in a sense. It's through thermal inertia, it's just kind of figuring out this humidity. I can't really explain it fully. It's tough to say, but even in these high humid climates, like in the UK with all those artifacts, they just are kind of trying to wrap their heads around why it stays between 40 and 60% at all times inside. And so this is something that the scientists need to figure out a little bit closer, because I don't know exactly how it does that, but it's pretty amazing that it does. Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. We'll find out more. Stay tuned for that.
Can hempcrete be used for landscape walls in Boulder to build a slab for a hot tub or a passive solar greenhouse? I'm going to guess no for the hot tub.
Well, not a slab, no, but we were actually going to help somebody with a little wall in the passive solar greenhouse. So not as flooring.
Okay.
Definitely as like maybe a retaining wall around the plants to help its But
it could be an outdoor retaining wall. That would be fine.
Absolutely.
Huh. Great. Are you or anyone else getting UL listing for hempcrete? This would make it much easier to get approved by various building departments. Have you heard anything about that?
Inform me on the UL listings.
Yeah, I'm not. I guess I'm not sure. I've always heard about it just in terms of electrical. I guess maybe this would be in terms. This question came from Scott Rodwin. In terms of electrical or fire, is that right, Jessica? Yeah. So in terms of fire, I guess it would be the UL listing.
I'm not sure. Yeah, we'll definitely look into that, and we'll get in touch with Scott for sure.
Okay.
Find out more about that.
That would be a great thing to post, definitely. So a hempcrete exterior wall doesn't need a vapor barrier or building wrap or WRB of any kind, basically.
Actually, that goes against what you cannot use one of those. You do not want to seal it in. It's a breathable wall. So to use a vapor wrap would go against what it does. It would ruin the performance of it. Yeah, which is beautiful.
Well, you could use one of our vapor open building wraps and then we can work together. Let's see. Next one. Do you think there's any potential for using biological binding agents instead of lime? For example, sodium alginate or algae mycelium. Have you heard of anybody doing anything like that?
Oh, no, good. You just said it. I love hearing that. I had somebody come over to my house, a friend of a friend's, and he's like, I got it. He was like this mad scientist from Portland, Oregon. He's like, I figured it out. And it's a mycelium brick with hemp. And so this is in the works big time. And I know algae is a huge thing. Will Schrubar's very big on the algae. Algae actually being the fastest growing plants on the planet next to, and then second is bamboo and third is hemp. So in terms of carbon sequestration, algae is fantastic. I don't know enough personally about the algae, but I am very excited to use mycelium because it's not even a plant. It's amazing. It's like half human, half plant. And what its capabilities are endless almost. So to mix these two, yes, there's a huge future and we are in the R&D stages of making some mycelium and hemp bricks.
Wow. Then you're talking about the ultimate low carbon hippie house there. I love it.
Yeah, and you know, the other cool thing is how we were speaking of doing it is you just kind of throw the hemp in the wall and then inoculate the wall, and it's building itself over time. And then you just pull the forms out, you stop the inoculation process, and you have a wall, and nobody had to tamp anything.
Let it grow.
Let it grow.
You'll be growing walls instead of building walls.
That's right.
So Dominic Espinoza is a special inspector dealing with concrete and structural panel tests. Have you teamed up with any testing firms to create standards? And how can they obtain a sample for their own testing?
You can definitely email us and we will talk about getting you a sample. Absolutely, we will do that. And yeah, we've been trying to, we will be getting in touch, connecting with CU about testing, structural, all those things. I mean, in my backyard, we have slammed it, broken it. We actually took some guns out and shot it because we heard this claim of that. And I didn't believe it, and I don't know what their hempcrete was made of, but we put a slug through 15 inches of hempcrete, so it is not bulletproof. At least the stuff we had, but yes, we want to do a hell of a lot more testing on that.
We got a couple more follow-ups to that UL question. It sounds like there's a lot of people with different experience on this. So Scott, following up, said, when Jeff Rupert got UL listing for straw bale, that was a watershed moment that allowed it to be used more widely. And another follow-up from Bob Dalton says the UK fire approvals translate to UL approval for fire rating. So it sounds like maybe it would, you know, because of the fire resistance is so strong, it should be able to pass that sort of thing pretty easily. So I mean, I bet it would be one of those things that you could it just kind of requires some testing, and then you would definitely be able to sign off on the approval because that resistance is so high. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of interest in that particular. Like, we could have another discussion on that. What is the cure time for the material once installed?
Great question. So we're finding it's usually around 4 weeks. It all depends on where you are, climate,
and the thickness of the wall.
And the thickness of the walls, absolutely. But it also depends on what binder you're using. So if you're using a little bit more natural cement, it will cure quicker. So yeah, that changes, but we're going with around 4 weeks. Now, if you're building in Puerto Rico, it's probably going to be around 5-6 weeks. So that's about the time. And then it continues to cure. So we didn't really mention this. but it cleans your home of carbon dioxide as it's curing, as the lime is petrifying and becomes a rock. And this happens a lot over the first few days, but some claims say it's happening over years. So it's cleaning your home consistently.
So we got about 4 more questions, and I think we're going to cut it there and just say you guys are going to have to talk to them later. Okay, for a few more. If you're reducing the number of studs, you're counting on the hempcrete for some amount of structural capacity, the shear strength that we talked earlier. Where can we find data for what's allowable in that front, in terms of like reducing the number of studs?
Well, this is something that's been done on people's own. We're not suggesting doing that. I don't think anybody's going to pass that yet, and that's why we need to do more testing on a regulatory level to prove that. They have done the test over in France, but and the UK, but you know that it's not here in America, and we can get those numbers for you.
Yeah, I mean, I find like we've had that struggle plenty of times in our company. There's plenty of times that it gets tested to the max in Germany, and then we bring it over and we're like, well, the test doesn't count here, even though it's the same test. There's always struggles there. Have you connected with sounds like a company, New West Genix in Fort Collins? They're improving the seed for growing productive hemp plants for CBD, seed, food, and herd.
Great. No, but we'd love to talk to them.
New West Genix. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge thing. They talked about this at the Winter Hemp Summit last year. Bill Billings was big on this, Colorado Hemp Project, getting certified seeds. What grows in what climates, where, why is the herd from Romania and France better than the herds here or Canada, you know, vice versa. And what are those strains and why we need them certified? And so people can get this. So that's coming on board. Once again, we all have to grow together. And so, right, the hemp farmers went really fast and they just, you know, threw whatever hemp in. And so certification is a huge deal and it's coming on, but we would love to talk to New West Genix.
How would hempcrete react in a flood-prone area?
That's great. So when we talked about the 93% humidity for a sustained amount of time, now it doesn't want to sit in a puddle. But if like God forbid it happens again, but that huge flood back in 2013, that would go. It can sit in a puddle and still hold its structure for a pretty long period of time. I've had a brick of hempcrete that has been sitting outside of my house, and it just sits there. The structural integrity it gets back to normal after it dries out. So it doesn't just crumble and fall apart. So in a high flooded area, if the flood happens and it was over a couple days, I don't see a large issue with that.
Especially if there's a lime plaster on the outside, which would
a little bit more.
The key though is you don't want to build hempcrete directly onto the ground. So you want some sort of foundation, which should also protect it against the flooding.
Right. Consistent water is not good. Immersed.
That makes sense. Because then you're also going to have that uptake of the capillary like action taking up the water.
Yeah. We do a little vapor barrier on the base plates.
Yeah.
To make sure that doesn't happen.
So final question, and then we're just gonna like open it up after that. And if people are hanging out, that's great. We'll just hang out for a little bit. But final questions. Talk a little bit about the future of hempcrete as you see it in the state, in the region, and promising materials, and also I know we didn't talk about the bats, but I would also just love to know if you guys are where those are sourced from as well. You know, just what we have in store from you guys for the foreseeable future.
I think the sky's the limit with Hempcrete in the industry, being such a large industry, and the opportunities, speed of it going in, like we were talking about with the prefabrication. I think that's a big thing. The bricks is also a really good idea for dry time to do larger scale. Can happen very easy. Actually, one of my first visions and dreams when I started this was to build a completely off-grid, passive solar prefab studios that you can snap up in 3 days in your backyard or wherever you need it, and just face it in the right direction, south, and it'll take care of itself with a couple panels. I think that's one venture that we will take on pretty darn soon. But yeah, it's so versatile that I don't know, the sky's the limit. I mean, and it'll get more efficient and faster as more machines come out that can apply it quicker with less labor.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The particularly getting it from the mixer to your workspace. You know, there's the Arizi system. There's also another system out in France. But that's you know, it's trying to cut out the labor because at the moment the cast in situ is relatively labor intensive, and then the panels and the bricks, and that seems to be the way it's going.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so there's a great time lapse of a hemp. If you want to look it up on YouTube, over in Europe, they do a hempcrete building in 3 days, a home, and it's prefab, and it's just beautiful to watch. So in 3 days, they threw up, I don't know, what was it, 3,000 square foot home in 3 days with the paneling, with one crane. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And for the bats, yeah, I mean, you guys are you sourcing those?
Yeah, absolutely. That's coming from Canada. So yeah, we can definitely talk about those. I think they're fantastic. They got great mechanical structure. It's an R3.7 per inch. They come in a multitude of sizes, 2-inch thickness, 3.5, 5.5, and 7.25 to fit all certain size, different size studs, and widths as well. So 16 on center and 24 on center. And using it, it's a dream. I mean, yes, you do wear a mask because there is dust going in, but you can make a bed out of it if you got tired and take a quick nap in it. So it's just a very, very clean material, and all you need is just an angle grinder to cut it. Yeah, it's great stuff. Price point's a little tough at this point. It's a little bit of a hard sell at this moment, but that's going to come down real soon with more people growing and more people understanding.
Do you think we'll see those in the U.S. anytime soon, sourced more locally or developed more locally?
I sure hope so, because I love that material to coincide with concrete, especially in roofs and flooring, in the subfloor. It's just a fantastic, quick option. It goes in so easily. Like I said, the mechanical strength, it does not sag, and so I just, and it's also hygroscopic as well. It's not fireproof, and some people kind of get those two mixed up. It will light on fire, so that's not something. If that's an issue, that's not something you'd want to use. But in terms of a thermal bat insulation, it is absolutely fantastic. And as you know, as green as it gets. It only has 8% polyester to help it hold together, but it's 92% hemp.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it a few times, and I can't wait to see that more commonly. We should definitely be making that in Colorado, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to see it.
So we're going to call it there. Thank you so much, Roland and Eamonn, for joining us and presenting today. Do everyone who's still on, we got a lot of you still with us. We're going to cut it here. Do check out our events page and sign up for How I Green Built this next week. and we'll see you all later. Thanks.
So much.
Thank you.
Blessings.